Phil, I wanted to talk about, this is more of for people who are interested in the Legacy format but haven't really dived in yet, some of the myths the surrounding Legacy, some of the things that we might be able to dispel as sort of urban legends in Legacy. And I think that it's worth as far as getting people into this format or interested in this format, kind of dispel some of these myths. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm into dispelling some myths. I wish Dispel was playable.
Finding the right high-end cards for Legacy, Vintage, Pre-Modern, or Old School Magic can be challenging. That's where friends 3-for-1 trading come in.
3-for-1 Trading is one of Europe's top Magic the Gathering retailers with an incredible selection of premium singles, sealed product, and even full sets, all available with free, fast, and secure worldwide shipping.
They add fresh inventory every Wednesday with weekly deals and discounts. So whether you're hunting for that elusive piece of power, a Legacy staple, or something spicy for your collection, they've got you covered.
First high-end orders over $500 or €500, use the code EDFREE to get free worldwide shipping.
Check them out now at the number 3, the number 4, the number 1.gg/ED. That link takes you right to the shop and helps support the channel.
Huge thanks to 3-for-1 Trading for supporting the Legacy community. Now back to the show.
Well, I mean, the first one right out of the gate is the price myth, right? People will immediately tell you Legacy's too expensive. Every deck is just too expensive compared to whatever you could be doing with your money in Magic the Gathering as opposed to playing Legacy, right? What do you think of this myth?
Yeah, a lot of it is just tied up into dual lands being dual lands are really the bottleneck, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like those are the reserve list cards that are ostensibly more expensive because of Commander, right? Like the Commander is really the driving force behind dual lands. I mean, yes, it's reserve list, but it's reserve list Commander cards. But there are plenty of decks that don't rely or need that many dual lands to actually be optimal for like the current metagame.
Yeah, I mean there are off-tier decks for sure that you can play. I wouldn't suggest going to win at a tournament, but if you're starting starting your path onto Legacy, you could play decks like Death Shadow that don't need dual lands, right? 8 Cast does not need dual lands and has a lot of crossover with Modern, which is a place you may be coming in from. If you are a CEDH player, you know also that a lot of places that play Magic are okay with you playing proxies. I'm under the whole, if you see a proxy, no, you fucking didn't. Mantra, as far as like if people are proxying cards to play in tournaments, no, they're not.
Yeah, no, of course.
That's my stance on people's of proxies that look like actual Magic cards, quote unquote counterfeits. That the whole counterfeit versus proxy thing is to me, in my opinion, a way for people to make like kind of gatekeep this format, and I just don't believe in it. But
yeah,
more important,
that's a matter of intent, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Counterfeits are for
selling,
malintent, and proxies are not.
Exactly. So to that end, proxies obviously are a thing you can do. Dual lands are expensive. I'm gonna agree with you. Having to spend upwards of $2,000 to $3,000 on a mana base is not ideal, but it is where we are. But another thing I wanted to say, Phil, is if you're coming in from another competitive format, if you're playing Standard right now, like a competitive Standard deck is like $2,000.
Yeah, and that's the same thing for most of the other formats at this point. Like the mana bases for Legacy are really where it gets expensive. I mean, if you wanted to play, like when it comes to one of the top decks right now, it's like you could play what we just did on the channel. You could play Blue Tron, and if you were playing Modern, your One Rings now have another home, and the mana base for that is really just Ancient Tombs when it comes to cards that are expensive. And Ancient Tomb has been reprinted multiple times. It's still expensive, but it's not dual land expensive. And the rest of the mana base is cheap. And the cards themselves that are otherwise in the deck are nowhere near as expensive. That's a relatively cheap budget deck, given that the most expensive cards really in that deck are One Rings.
Also, Phil, I know you're the type of person that likes a quest. You're on that altar quest, right? But Legacy gives you a sort of side quest to go to. Like, if I want to play a specific deck in Legacy and I don't have the cards for it yet, I can slowly build while playing other decks to get those cards, right? That's a thing that I think a lot of people discount when they're talking about like, oh, Legacy's too expensive. Like the only way you're allowed to play Legacy is by having a completely optimized deck, and you can not throw in non-duels. That sort of, like, you can play like a slightly unoptimized version of your deck at the LGS until you get those cards. Put fetch lands, put pain lands in there, and put shock lands and stuff into your deck, and learn how to play the game, and then be like, okay, cool, like I like this is fun. Now I'll invest. I think that it's that people overblow the concept that you have to just immediately spend like $3,000 to play this format when you could slowly build into it, especially if you're the type of person who has like an EDH and plays EDH, and you have a dual land or two, and like, okay, I'll pick up another one, that sort of thing. So I think that the price thing is kind of silly at this point. Like,
Surveillance
we're spending too much money on Magic cards as it is, right?
Surveillance have eaten into some of the real estate of dual lands in a lot of decks anyway.
Yeah.
So a lot of the decks don't run as many dual lands as they used to. Like if you're looking at the Underground Sea decks, like those are still running all the Underground Seas. But if you look at like something like Nadu or Breakfast, like
I'm running 4 dual lands in my Breakfast deck.
And like a lot of like most of those decks play 2 Surveil lands, and like a certain number. And like granted, those decks and the mana bases for those decks are typically their soft point, but that's not due to constraint. That's just due to the strategy and what it's trying to do and all of the tools that it wants in order to operate. But like I think that there's still some space. Like last year's Eternal Weekend, there was a top 8 that was red, white, D&T, and of all the dual lands, like Plateau is on the lower end. Like you can get multiple plateaus for what would be less than an Underground Sea.
Yeah,
and
you can probably get 3 plateaus for 1 Underground Sea,
and have that list. Yeah, so like there is some amount of room for maneuvering depending on the kind of deck that you like to play. And a lot of the decks too, like if you like to play Storm, your bottleneck is probably going to be more so like LEDs than it is any of the duels, because a lot of those mana bases are filling in Surveil lands, so they'll play one of each duel or that they play, and then the Surveil lands play a bunch of Surveil lands because that's really operating on their fixing. And so there's a lot of space like in that regard. When it comes to like the expensive outliers, it's really going to be reserve list stuff. Like if you wanted to play Karn One Ring deck, like your Grim Monoliths are going to run you a pretty penny.
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas if you play the blue Karn decks like that don't play the Grim Monoliths, then that's a much cheaper deck to get into with. So there's a couple of different strategies that you can play. There's also like a lot of control decks that like the Wizards control deck, the Flame of Manure Wizards deck. Those are all relatively cheap cards in the deck, and that deck plays like 6 or 7 basics and a couple of each duel. So like the price point to get in there is a lot less than what it would be if you were trying to jam Doomsday that needs all 4 Underground Sea, or Reanimator that wants to play all 4 Underground Seas. So there are a lot of the top decks that you would want to have the correct mana base for, because those are like streamlined, optimized decks. But there's a lot of decks that can compete that have plenty of interaction that you don't actually need the what is typically perceived as the bottleneck choke point for price to get in. And then you can then optimize, like you can get the strategy that you like. I just played against the Lands deck the other night, and Lands is typically a very like known to be an expensive deck because it has like Tabernacle and stuff in it. But you don't need a Tabernacle. Like there's a lot of like random one-off type cards like that might be expensive in a vacuum, but aren't necessary for whatever metagame you're currently in. And so those cards, you can it's like if you just assume that like you have that card in your deck and then just never see it, it's like, how many points are you really losing in whatever matchups you are? And there's probably alternatives that you can play that are probably just as good, if not, even if they're not like, quote unquote, the best possible version of things. I think there's room to explore. But a lot of those cards are reprinted in like new variations. So if you're cool with that, like you can probably find cheaper versions. Like Explorations used to be a bit pricier, but because they've been
they were like
reprinted
$40, $50 cards.
So
Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield.com. Moxfield is the best deck building website on the internet. You can find all of my and Phil's decks in links below, including decks from this episode. And if you do, you'll be directly supporting the channel. So the next myth I want to dispel is the gameplay myth. This misconception is Legacy is just a bunch of turn 1 combo kills in non-games.
Yeah, now it's turn 2 combo kills in non-game.
No, but I mean, for the most part, I think, is Legacy at its healthiest it's ever been? I wouldn't say yes, but I think that most games last for a few turns. You get a little bit of agency in Legacy more than you would in say like Vintage or something like that out of the gate. And even Vintage, I would say you do get a good amount of agency. The turn 1 combo kill thing is just Oops All Spells kind of being this like boogeyman that like sits in the format and colors people's perceptions of the format. But like even, the decks that are like Cephalid Breakfast is a deck that comes to mind. It's like you play your Shuka on turn 1, you play your Illusionist on turn 2. There's a lot of like, if I want to go off, I have to make some decisions if I'm doing that. And one of those decisions is like, does my opponent have any sort of answer to this? Like, do I have a force of will in hand to stop it? There's a lot more going on to Legacy than like, oh, I just got the cards I needed and I won the game. Mulligan decisions matter a lot as well. But I don't think that this is not a turn one combo kill. Whereas, like, I think what you'll see a lot of discourse online is people who play Magic Online would be like, oh, I just hate playing Oops All Spells. And look, no one likes that deck. That deck can go right to hell. But I think that that's a much lower percentage of the game that is tainting the discourse on the game.
Yeah, most of the time in a vacuum, there are tons of decks that can ostensibly end the game on turn 2. The power level is just such that, we've reached that point. But you're typically sitting across from a warm body that has a plan for all of the things that can otherwise do that. And so it's, yes, there are the games that end that way. That is the threat and contention of the format. It is a powerful format. But it is not necessarily the majority of what that perception might be to an outsider. If somebody is looking to get into Legacy, they shouldn't be... if anything, I think the bigger boogeyman is WotC's neglect of the format than the format itself.
Agreed. That could change. Like, we get 3 to 4 bans a year. That can all change. Like, yeah, the game ostensibly is supposed to get better every time there's a ban, right?
And if you're coming from a younger format too, like, if you look at something like Modern, like, a lot of games ostensibly end because a person just goes, God of Souls into Ocelot Pride because they pre-conned an energy deck. And, there are a lot of tools in Legacy that otherwise aren't available in the younger formats that can help assuage the consistency with which that the fast combo myth would otherwise persist. Is Legacy combo heavy? Yeah, it's been combo heavy for a while because it hasn't been catered to in a bit. But there are enough tools to at least prevent that sort of myth from being true to the percentage that I think anybody would need to concern
to not
themselves
play the
with
format for
exactly.
It, right?
Yeah. Is there are there certain play patterns that need to be corrected for? Yeah, that has been the case, but that's sort of been the case for all of Magic for the last handful of years. Like, Standard has not fared any better than that.
Yeah, if you're playing competitively to the point where you want to get into Legacy, you're used to that much,
Yeah. I don't think Legacy is unique in the regard that WotC is sort of dropping the ball in the R&D department, but oh man, I just don't want to not play any Magic. I think you actually are going to find that the gameplay is fairly rich once you are a little bit past the initial presumption phase of
Another myth, Phil, is Legacy is a dying format with no events.
It's a dying format with no events?
Dying format with no events.
I didn't know that was a myth, but that sounds pretty dumb. I think that if you're talking about it in a local scene, I think that the local scene, if there aren't events for your local scene, you just got to talk to your LGS and the player base around to make it happen. When I was bouncing back and forth for work down from New York down into Nashville, I was spending a good amount of time in Nashville. That scene was had a Legacy event bi-weekly. And then I knew I was going to be there for more frequently. And I was like, hey, everybody who comes to these bi-weekly events, do you guys think you would be willing to come out and make this weekly and do a weekly event? And they were like, yeah, if we can make it happen. And then there were a couple of the leaders in that community that were like, yeah, let's talk to the store and see if they'll operate. And the store was just like, if you guys show up, we'll run the event. We're happy to
we'll take your money,
get an entry fee, have you guys in the shop and play an event,
sell those singles. Yeah,
we can provide that for you if you show up. Then players were like, yeah, let's do it. We showed up and then became a weekly thing. Here in New York, we had there was I really wanted, it seemed like there was an opportunity for, we had Game Storia, which is where you see a lot of 90s MTG content that takes place on Mondays. And there was just sort of, I could tell, a hunger, including for myself, for another significant event, particularly as we get closer to big events like Eternal Weekend, which is another, people can plan for those things. And so we were able to get everybody together. We talked to the TOs at Hex & Co., which is they have a couple of shops throughout the city. And we were like, do you think you could make something happen for Friday nights? And they were like, do you think that there would be a turnout for Friday night? That was every LGS's response is always going to be, will you turn out?
Can you get people? Yeah.
Can you get there? If you can get there, we have no problem. That, our function is to hold these types of things. We just need bodies to actually be there.
Phil, it's easier to get people, and maybe I'm speaking to a very minute number of people, but it's easier to get people to come to your Legacy event than it is to come to see your band.
Yeah. band is your band is going to be what like you. Hopefully, you like the music, but it's like
I'm just saying. I've been to sparsely. I've played to rooms of 1 people before.
Dude, I would be a solo audience for Zach Clark and the Griswolds.
Yeah. But yeah, I think beyond like the LGS, which is again, that's community based. Get your community involved. If you're having trouble getting people to get into the format because they're, the other 2 things, educate them. Try and get a proxy friendly LGS to get that going, right? But beyond that, we have these tentpole events like any of the SCG cons, Buffalo Chicken Dip, of course, Eternal Weekend. And now we have the Steel City Spectacular and that the
Excalibur events picking
Excalibur events is starting to do things.
We have the Magic Cup at the Magic Cons.
And the Magic Cup that we helped implement. So if you really think about it, there are a lot of, and generally I can't go to like every single event ever. It's fine that they're kind of spaced out a little bit. It makes them feel more special to me, in truth. Like having this like Super Bowl style, like once a year event that is Eternal Weekend that like everyone cares about is important to me. I think that makes that event that much more special. That's why we're going to do 2 of them this year, because like we want to get all the squeeze out of that juice.
There's something that I noticed as another opportunity. We're going to be in SCG Baltimore to play the main event for Sorcery, the card game Sorcery. I would not have gone to that event if you weren't like, yo, let's go play in this event because Sorcery is fun. But there are 2 Legacy 1Ks in Baltimore.
Exactly.
I would not go to Baltimore if there only were Legacy 1Ks. But because I'm going to play in the main event for another game with you, there are now 2 opportunities to play Legacy. Those events do exist.
And that's a nice size event.
But it is interesting that like by trying another game, there's actually, I'm finding more opportunity to play competitive Legacy as well, which I would not have put 2 and 2 together. Be like, oh, if I explore another game, will I play more Legacy? Like it doesn't, you wouldn't think that at first glance, but that's ultimately what's happening.
Phil, I want to outline a scenario for you to take us away from this for just a moment.
Okay.
You're an overnight truck driver, right?
Okay.
You're driving.
I'm assuming the position. Yeah.
It's late night, you're nodding off, and you're about to have what I like to call a large Marge event happen, right?
Sounds like I should pull over.
Yeah, you should pull over, or alternate reality shift here. You're an overnight truck driver. You've been driving all night, but you've been listening to the Eternal Durdles podcast the entire time, so you're awake because we're here keeping you not only alive but engaged. Don't you think that's worth $5, Phil?
Well, I would think if it's that, or the alternative is crashing my large, otherwise incomprehensibly difficult to drive vehicle, then yeah. So.
And then winding up, as a story at the local truck stop during Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So what I'm proposing here, Phil, is that people go to patreon.com/Eternal Durdles and just, it's good for you. It's good for us. We're going to keep you alive on that long overnight truck drive commute, or maybe the commute you have in the morning, or maybe back home from work. So just putting that out there. Patreon.com/Eternal Durdles. Join us at the $5 Durdle Maniacs pledge level, and you get ad-free content too.
And if our voices are putting you to sleep while you're driving your massive truck, well, then pull over and join the Patreon anyway.
Yeah, it's true. All right, the next myth that I want to dispel is Legacy is a solved format.
We talked about this on the last episode where we were about like what the possible things that WotC could do regarding the data that they have, and we were arguing for the formats that are not their PT or RCQ formats that they just release the data for, which would just essentially mean Legacy and Vintage. Because presumably, like what they have explained as to why they don't release all the data that they gather to make decisions is they don't want formats to be solved too quickly. Now, that's, I think, a fool's errand to begin with the age that we're in, and that like if a community like ours wants to collect data, then you have the Legacy data collection doing all of that effort anyway. But that is effort that WotC is like compelling because that is something that we desire. But if they don't want a format solved as quickly, okay, cool. I can understand that if you're like, yeah, we don't want our promotional events, which are the Pro Tours and big RCQ events, to otherwise be solved, even though it is very clear that, for Standard that has happened anyway, and the last 2 ones have been pretty embarrassing. But like, for the stuff that otherwise it's like what if it's like you don't want a format solved too quickly. I think the other thing would be true if there wasn't the looming hand of like we want to make sure that our promotional tours ostensibly aren't solved too quickly. For Legacy and Vintage, who cares? I think that there's the other side of it. If we got more data and like looked at the data, it may present opportunities for places to explore that people otherwise wouldn't put the effort into, because they're like, why would I put the effort into something to like learn this myself when I can just play what I know is a good strategy? But if data bore out and like we saw it, that it's like, oh, this actually overperforms what people think, maybe we could tune something and that would be better against a particular metagame. So, I think like when it comes to is the format solved, Legacy for the most part, I think is solved in terms of its pillars, but not necessarily solved in terms of its.
Yeah. Well, also, Phil, I mean, look at the history of the game since we've been playing Legacy. I started in like 2014-ish, I think, whenever Khans of Tarkir came out and gave me access to fetch lands.
I'm sorry for you.
Yeah, well, let's think about like what Legacy looked like then, right? A lot of Delver, a lot of Miracles was a deck, Stoneblade, all decks. Those are not decks you see now, right? You fast forward, you see Deathblade, you see Infect was a deck that people played occasionally, Maverick. There's a ton of different decks to play in the format to begin with, like literally like a ton. Like you could play like 9 or 10 different decks at the super competitive level, and over 100 in the format like that just exist as like archetypes that you can play, right? So there's that. But then also there's the fact that like your staples remain pretty much for the most part staples. Force of Will stays in the format, is changeable through several decks. But the cards in the format churn in such a way that it isn't stagnant. The decks aren't stagnant. Like I guarantee you in like 2 or 3 years when we're having an episode just like this, we'll be like, oh yeah, remember that there was like a two-year period where Dimir Reanimator was the best deck. But before 2 years ago, Dimir Reanimator was not even on the radar of top 10 decks. The format does churn. It does change.
The threats overhaul to some extent. I mean, I remember when Minsk and Boo was just everywhere.
Yeah. People weren't even playing black like 2 years ago. Come on.
The experience of playing against Minsk and Boo was abysmal. My God, it was awful.
Now you long for those days.
Now nobody plays it. Now it's all now, and the 4-mana planeswalker that you run into is Kaito, and you can't even fight over it on the stack. So it's like the monkey paw curl.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I think that like when it comes to the sort of backbone staples for effects that they otherwise will never push, like they'll never push free spells in the same way. Like we got the evoke creatures from Modern Horizons and such, but those are still not quite at the same level as the other free spells that we got, like Days and Wasteland, and so that type of stuff is always going to maintain its spot, whereas like the threats will churn based on what is around and what the other pillars that are applying pressure to them are.
And as cards come into the format, decks kind of horse trade for like dominance. Like a perfect example is Doomsday was like a meme deck until Thassa's Oracle came into play.
So was Cephalid Breakfast.
Exactly. Same thing with Cephalid Breakfast. Those were decks that are like, I would consider those like tier 1 style decks now. Like those are decks that you can play and win a tournament with. But back in the day, like those were not decks. I remember when, like 2 years ago when Koval won with Cephalid Breakfast, I was like, I need to see this deck because I haven't really played against it at all. Because it wasn't a deck that's played in the format. Now it's the deck that I play, And
that deck at the time when he won was a 4 of Staff of the Storyteller deck.
Yeah, and now, totally different deck.
And now Staff is wholly unplayable.
Yeah. All right. So I think we've disbanded the dead format myth. Let's talk about our final myth. And that will be, let's see.
For anybody listening, we're trying to keep our episodes to a tight half hour for all you truck drivers out there. And we wrote down well more myth than we would be able to cover in a half-hour stint.
Yeah. Let's talk about the community myth. That Legacy.
Well, what's the community myth?
Legacy is just a gate-kept old boys club.
Yes, stay out. Get out of here. If you weren't here before, we pulled the ladder up behind us.
Yeah, I don't know about this.
We don't put out content, both written and video, trying to get more players to play this format that we like. That's absurd.
Yeah, that's the thing is like,
that's a myth that's true.
This format's not like a well-kept secret. Like, there are plenty of people of color, people, of all genders and sexual orientations that play this format. I don't know. I think that this is a format that is one of the most diverse in the type of person that you'll play against. Maybe not socioeconomically, I guess.
I think
at
that's
all times, but I think
I would say that that's probably Magic as a hobby in general.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
Magic is a pretty, like, you got to be pretty well off if you're playing at like competitive high-end sanctioned events. Like if you're playing at proxy events, which, hopefully eventually all Eternal formats that are held at any level that isn't exactly run by Wizards of the Coast are proxy friendly. But we've already talked about that.
Well, I think the thing I want to get at with this, Phil, is that the Legacy community is incredibly welcoming. Like, when I first got into Legacy, people were going out of their ways to offer, like, hey, like, do you need to borrow anything for this tournament or whatever? Like, do you want to try out a different deck? I'll let you borrow my duels for that deck. Like, I think, as long as you get involved with the Legacy community, you'll find it to be incredibly welcoming. And you'll see a lot of the same people at large events. Like, that's a lot of my like long-term friends are people that I run into at big events like SCG Con, or I run into at like Eternal Weekend every year, and we all say hi to each other. We all go out for dinner and hang out. Like, I love the idea that like this is a format that's not just welcoming, but is like built on being social.
Yeah, I think that the Eternal communities are extremely generous with their time, with their cardboard, with their effort,
just including you in like in the culture of like Legacy.
I think that that's the real nod is like how deep and rich the history of the format is and the players therein. I mean, there was the most recent Ristic Studies video where he covers Oops All Spells as a deck and like the formation of that deck, but like you track, like he was pulling out stuff from way back, like off the source, which was just a community forum of people coming together.
Yeah.
There's nothing different about that as there is with any of the other formats where, like one thing that's also true about Legacy is because archetypes ostensibly last forever. It's not like because the format doesn't rotate, you find like the communities within the community at large. So like if you play Maverick, like you can go to greensunzenith.com and like check out everything associated with Maverick and all of the people that are trying to refine and improve that deck. If you play Storm, you can go over to theepicstorm.com. If you like want to just like see coverage on any type of archetype, for the most part there is a place to go for you, or a creator or specialist of that type of archetype. Like you go to Fenris Cloud if you want to find out about Infect. Like there's all of the discords. Like you want to talk Painter, like go listen to Everyday Eternal, where like it's a bunch of good Storm pilots that all have like Painter experience, and they'll tell you what's good and what's bad in that archetype. If
you want to rail against the banner restricted announcements and talk about implementing a Legacy community panel, you come here. Yeah.
If you want to hear like how to improve decks that otherwise can never be improved upon because they're obsolete, I got you, fam.
That's like, what we're here for.
We're here for you.
But I will say this: I think that and this is kind of where I want to leave it, is like I think that the Legacy Magic community is actually one of the more welcoming communities, and honestly, again, the least toxic. I'm just going to throw another stray at Commander as being not a format for people that actually want to play Magic the Gathering competitively against each other. But I think that's one of those things where like you know what you're getting into with Legacy. People are there to have competitive games, and they're happy and excited to bring in new players, because what do new players generally mean? More scrubs to beat. And you start out as a scrub, and then you get to a point where you're no longer donating money to the people winning the tournaments. You're the guy winning the tournament.
I've been
or gal.
I've been in the Legacy world for a very long time, and I don't think I've ever not been a scrub.
One of these days, you'll stop donating money.
I think I don't know. I think I was just stay out. This is a gatekept format. Get out of here.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll catch you on the flip. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button.
You can also support us on patreon.com/Eternal Durdles, which now offers the new deck donation tier.
During July, the deck donation patrons will get a 2-for-1 special, where both Phil and I will run your deck through a league.
I'll play literally whatever you want.
So brew your spiciest or stock us up with a stock list.
I'll literally play whatever you want.
Thanks for watching.